I tried to understand why he behaved the way he did and why he was so reckless and callous and honestly abusive to other women.
Matt Lauer earned $25 million a year, yet it wasn't enough to protect him. For years, he was America's most trusted morning voice, until November 29, 2017, when it all collapsed in just 24 hours. His co-hosts announced his firing live on air as 10 million viewers watched in shock. The man who once interviewed presidents and Hollywood's biggest stars disappeared overnight. But what really happened behind those cameras, and why can't he ever come back? Join us as we find out how Matt Lauer lost it all. 25 million scandal NBC tried to bury forever. The story NBC presented to the public was only the surface. What they left out, and what internal documents later exposed, was a calculated cover-up that stretched to the highest levels of network leadership. While Matt Lauer was cashing in $25 million a year, NBC executives were quietly paying settlements to silence his accusers. Non-disclosure agreements kept the public in the dark, shielding the network from scandal, while victims carried the weight alone. Insiders confirmed that NBC had received repeated complaints about Lauer's workplace behavior years before his firing. These weren't isolated incidents. They described a clear pattern of sexual harassment and misconduct that poisoned the environment inside the Today Show's offices. The most damaging proof came from internal communications showing executives knew about the complaints. Still, they chose to protect their star performer, whose presence on screen generated hundreds of millions in advertising revenue. Protecting profits came before protecting people. Ann Curry's experience revealed the network's real priorities. When female colleagues confided in her about Lauer's behavior, she escalated their concerns to human resources. Instead of addressing the complaints, NBC pushed Curry out, firing the co-host who spoke up while renewing Lauer's $25 million contract. The message was unmistakable: defend the network's biggest moneymaker, no matter the cost. Speak up, and your career would be over. That fear silenced victims and reinforced a toxic culture where harassment went unchecked. Ronan Farrow later uncovered evidence that NBC had been using confidential settlements for years to prevent Lauer-related complaints from surfacing. The network denied it, dismissing them as routine agreements. But the documents Farrow obtained painted a different picture. This wasn't random misconduct, it was a system. NBC prioritized reputation management and revenue over workplace safety. Women inside the network described feeling cornered, trapped in a cycle where their choices were to remain silent or risk being pushed out. Even as complaints piled up, NBC continued to market Lauer as America's trusted morning anchor. Viewers invited him into their homes daily, unaware of what executives already knew. The show's dominance in ratings and advertising dollars made him untouchable. Behind closed doors, meetings focused on containing fallout rather than confronting the truth. Protecting the brand mattered more than protecting employees. Executives even worked to suppress damaging stories in entertainment media, leveraging their influence to keep Lauer's image clean. Years of shielding him only fed his sense of power. Lauer operated as though the usual rules didn't apply, because inside NBC, they didn't. His salary, his ratings, and his status placed him above accountability, and the network made sure it stayed that way. However, all of NBC's protective measures couldn't prevent what happened during the 2014 Winter Olympics. What incident would eventually bring down their entire house of cards? The night that sealed his fate. The 2014 Winter Olympics in Sochi marked the beginning of the scandal that would permanently end Matt Lauer's career. What allegedly happened in a hotel room that February night produced the detailed complaint that NBC could no longer ignore. According to the report delivered to executives in 2017, Lauer met a female NBC employee at the hotel bar. She had been drinking heavily, and her intoxication became a central part of the allegations. The woman claimed that after inviting her to his room, Lauer initiated sexual activity she had not agreed to. Despite her repeated attempts to decline, her impaired state and the power imbalance left her unable to resist. Facing NBC's most powerful anchor, she felt compliance was the only option. Unlike earlier complaints NBC had managed to bury, this report contained specific evidence that could not be silenced with settlements or non-disclosure agreements. The Olympic setting made the situation even more damning. Lauer was not only NBC's biggest star, but also the face of its international broadcast. The complaint sparked an internal investigation, and once it surfaced, other women stepped forward. One former Today Show producer described an incident from 2001 where Lauer summoned her to his office, locked the door, and pressured her to undress. The encounter allegedly escalated into non-consensual intercourse so traumatic that she lost consciousness. According to her account, Lauer's assistant even escorted her to seek medical help afterward, raising questions about what NBC staff and executives knew at the time. Additional women shared similar stories. One accused Lauer of exposing himself in his office, followed by retaliation when she rejected him. Another said he sent her an adult toy with a note describing how he wanted to use it with her. These accounts revealed not misunderstandings, but deliberate patterns of predatory behavior. The Sochi incident highlighted the worst of it. NBC's trusted morning anchor on the world stage allegedly assaulted a colleague who had no realistic way to refuse or report him. The timing left NBC with no escape. The Me Too movement was at its peak, with Harvey Weinstein and other powerful figures facing public reckoning. Quiet settlements were no longer enough to contain scandals. The evidence was too detailed, the cultural moment too charged. NBC executives realized that protecting Lauer was no longer possible. To continue shielding him would have caused more damage than ending his career. But even knowing all this evidence existed, nobody expected NBC to act as swiftly and brutally as they did on that November morning when millions of viewers got the shock of their lives. Live TV execution that shocked 10 million viewers. On November 29, 2017, the television world stopped in its tracks. What began as a routine morning on NBC's Today Show turned into one of the most dramatic firings in broadcast history. More than 10 million viewers tuned in expecting headlines and weather updates, only to witness their trusted morning anchor, Matt Lauer, cut down in real time. The decision had come so fast that even Today Show employees were blindsided. Hours before going live, production staff scrambled to rewrite scripts, while co-hosts Savannah Guthrie and Hoda Kotb prepared to deliver news that would shake their audience to the core. The moment arrived within minutes of the broadcast. Guthrie's voice trembled as she read the statement. Matt Lauer had been terminated for inappropriate sexual behavior. Her visible shock mirrored the disbelief of viewers who had welcomed him into their living rooms every morning for more than 2 decades. Beside her, Kotb fought to hold back tears as she read NBC's official explanation. Their reactions weren't staged television. They were genuine responses to the revelation that their workplace had been sheltering a predator. The fallout was immediate. Lauer wasn't just a familiar face. He was the highest-paid figure in broadcast news, earning $25 million a year and commanding unmatched influence. His sudden downfall sent shockwaves across the industry. Social media erupted within minutes. Viewers described feeling betrayed, even personally violated, by someone they had trusted daily. The parasocial bond Lauer built with millions made his exposure all the more devastating. NBC's statement was concise but damaging. Executives confirmed they had received a detailed complaint that violated company standards. They emphasized that this was the first complaint they had officially documented, but it was serious enough to terminate their star anchor without hesitation. The speed of the decision was unprecedented. Scandals involving high-profile personalities usually unfold slowly, with lengthy investigations and negotiated exits. NBC allowed Lauer no such courtesy. By the next morning, his email was shut off, his office cleared, and his name erased from Today Show branding. The financial consequences were staggering. NBC cut his $25 million salary without severance, making clear to both staff and the public that they wanted no lingering ties to their former star. Industry insiders watched closely. For decades, networks had protected their moneymakers through settlements and quiet dismissals. NBC's move signaled a turning point. In the wake of the Me Too movement, no celebrity was untouchable, not even one generating hundreds of millions in advertising revenue. The impact rippled far beyond NBC. Ratings for the Today Show dipped as loyal fans struggled to separate the scandal from the program itself. Rival networks capitalized on the moment, marketing their morning shows as scandal-free alternatives. But the greater impact lay in the message. NBC had set a precedent. Protecting powerful figures accused of harassment was no longer sustainable. The decision to fire Lauer showed employees across industries that speaking up could bring real consequences, even for untouchable stars. The shock lingered long after. Viewers who had grown up watching Lauer wrestled with the contradiction between the trusted anchor they thought they knew and the predator exposed behind the scenes. International media amplified the scandal, turning Lauer's fall into a global conversation about accountability, workplace harassment, and the crumbling immunity of television's most powerful men. That morning in November became more than a firing. It was the day broadcast journalism drew a line it could never erase. What most viewers never realized was that the evidence of Lauer's problematic behavior had been broadcast live into their homes for years, hidden in plain sight during his most famous interviews. The hidden camera evidence everyone missed. The most unsettling part of Matt Lauer's downfall is that the warning signs had been visible to millions of viewers long before the allegations surfaced. His on-air interviews often crossed professional boundaries, yet the moments were brushed aside as awkward television rather than recognized as glimpses into a troubling mindset. Behind the scenes, clips later revealed even more disturbing behavior. In one video, Lauer asked a female staff member to remain bent over because he liked the view. What some dismissed as a joke exposed the workplace power imbalance that left employees vulnerable and unable to push back safely. One of the most notorious examples came during his 2012 interview with Anne Hathaway. Rather than focus on her acting career, Lauer opened by discussing paparazzi photos taken without her consent. He called the incident a wardrobe malfunction, trivializing what was a clear violation of her privacy. By framing exploitation as entertainment, he showed how little value he placed on women's dignity. Hathaway's measured response, pointing out that society shouldn't commodify women's bodies without consent, showed how inappropriate his approach truly was. Sandra Bullock experienced similar treatment. During a promotional interview, Lauer repeatedly joked about seeing her nude scenes, even quipping that one image could become his computer's screensaver. Bullock's discomfort was obvious, but Lauer refused to redirect the conversation. If he felt comfortable making sexual jokes with an A-list star on camera, it raised troubling questions about how he behaved with colleagues who had far less power to object. The 2006 Britney Spears interview also became infamous in retrospect. Lauer focused on her parenting, using paparazzi photos and tabloid headlines as ammunition. His relentless questions drove Spears to tears on national television. Years later, documentaries examining media treatment of Spears cited the interview as a prime example of how journalists contributed to her public breakdown. Lauer's priorities were clear. Producing dramatic television came before showing empathy. These weren't isolated incidents. They reflected a consistent pattern of behavior, both on and off camera. Multiple workplace sources later described how Lauer's influence over the Today Show created an environment where inappropriate comments were normalized. Female employees felt unsafe but powerless to act against a man who generated hundreds of millions in advertising revenue and had near total job security. Accounts from staff detailed how Lauer made invasive remarks about women's appearances, asked personal questions that crossed professional boundaries, and created situations that left employees deeply uncomfortable. The power imbalance made resistance almost impossible. A single call from Lauer could end a career, and everyone knew it. Industry insiders even noted that Lauer's interview style had become more aggressive toward women as his fame grew. Instead of recognizing this as problematic, networks praised him for tough journalism. The disconnect between his polished public image as a trusted morning anchor and his treatment of women behind the scenes created a blind spot that protected him for years. By the time allegations finally forced NBC to act, the truth was unavoidable. The troubling behavior viewers once dismissed as awkward television was actually a reflection of who Matt Lauer had been all along. When the allegations finally became public, the personal destruction that followed was so complete that it shocked even Hollywood insiders who thought they had seen every type of celebrity downfall. Complete social annihilation of a media king. Matt Lauer's fall from grace wasn't just another Hollywood scandal, it was a total collapse. Within weeks of his firing from NBC, the man once treated like media royalty became a social outcast, abandoned by the same elite circles that had thrived on his influence. Friends who once packed his Hamptons parties cut off contact. Calls went unanswered. Invitations vanished. The social life that had defined him for decades dissolved overnight. For a man who fed on constant attention, the silence was crushing. Lauer retreated into his Hamptons estate, avoiding the New York media world where he once held enormous power. The change was so extreme that even longtime acquaintances struggled to connect the confident anchor they knew with the isolated figure he had become. In the Hamptons, where his presence once guaranteed prestige, his name turned toxic. Party hosts feared a single photo with him could stain their reputations. His calendar, once filled with charity galas, exclusive dinners, and industry events, went blank. Organizers didn't want the risk of headlines linking their names to his scandal. What had been a life of privilege and influence became a life of exile. At home, the collapse was just as brutal. His marriage to Annette Roque, already strained, finally ended. Divorce filings exposed years of secrecy, infidelity, and tension that predated the public allegations. Friends close to the family revealed that Roque had stayed in the marriage for appearances and for their children, but once the scandal broke, the facade was impossible to keep. What stood out most in the aftermath was Lauer's mindset. Instead of showing remorse, insiders said he saw himself as the victim, claiming NBC overreacted and public opinion turned him into an undeserving villain. He dismissed the accusations as minor missteps, while others described them as patterns of harassment and abuse. That refusal to take responsibility alienated even his remaining allies. His 2019 attempt at a comeback only deepened the damage. In a published opinion piece, Lauer tried to downplay the allegations, framing himself as misunderstood. But rather than sparking sympathy, it came across as tone-deaf, arrogant, and blind to the pain he caused. His effort at redemption collapsed before it even began. When word spread that Matt Lauer was dating marketing executive Shamin Abbas, it briefly looked like he was trying to rebuild a semblance of normalcy. The two were spotted together at restaurants and private gatherings in the Hamptons, but instead of easing him back into society, the relationship only highlighted how far he had fallen. Their appearances often stirred discomfort. At events where his ex-wife, Annette Roque, was also present, the atmosphere turned tense. What should have been ordinary social outings became reminders of unresolved wounds and public disgrace. Even in romance, the scandal followed him everywhere. Financially, Lauer's safety net came from years of careful investments and the kind of earnings few anchors in television history had ever achieved. Between prime real estate holdings in the Hamptons and the wealth he had accumulated during his decades at NBC, he was shielded from complete financial ruin. But the absence of his network salary, a paycheck that once placed him among the highest-paid figures in American media, changed everything. The endless stream of benefits that came with celebrity status was gone. Gone were the chartered flights, the VIP access, the constant flow of high-end perks that once reinforced his image as television royalty. He could no longer sustain the kind of lavish spending that had defined his identity for so long. Friends who had grown accustomed to his extravagant lifestyle noticed the difference immediately. Where Lauer had once hosted sprawling summer parties that drew celebrities, executives, and politicians, his estate grew quiet. Invitations to his home dwindled, not only because of his scandal, but because the grandeur that once defined those gatherings had disappeared. For a man whose identity had been tied as much to wealth and social power as to his role on morning television, the adjustment was more than financial, it was psychological. Stripped of both his platform and his status symbols, he faced a reality in which his influence no longer held weight. While his savings and property ensured he would never be destitute, the public and social currency he once commanded had been permanently spent. Perhaps the most striking part of his downfall is his near-total disappearance. In an era when disgraced public figures often chase comebacks through podcasts, social media, or self-produced platforms, Lauer chose silence. Whether that's because he knows his reputation is beyond repair, or because he still believes in a fantasy of returning to the spotlight, is unclear. Either way, his story stands as one of the most dramatic and complete erasures of a public figure in modern media. Thank you for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe. Also, check out another interesting video by clicking on the link shown on your screen. See you on the other side.